And so we were reading these sentences. And this little girl, she looked around and she was like, when did they learn to do that? And like she knew, she came in and she was like, well, I was the reader. And then that's how quickly everybody else can catch up.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Aboud, and I am here with Tanya Martin and our new guest, Miss Tanya Colburn. Welcome,
Thank
Tanya.
You. It's a privilege to be here. I watch your podcast all the time, and so I feel like, pretty neat that I get to be on the roundtable with you all.
We are so glad that you carved out time in your day to be with us. I really feel like it's Ask the Expert Day because you are the expert in your field teaching kindergarten. So tell us, how many years have you been at that?
Okay, I don't know if I'm the expert, but I have been teaching here for 9 years.
9 years. And with kindergartners all that time?
With kindergartners all that time. I taught 10 years at a public school.
Okay.
And about 9 years here.
Okay, so you've got almost 2 decades.
Yes.
Of teaching experience, which is not nothing.
You're so old, Tanya.
I don't feel it. All the time I ask them, like,
those 5-year-olds keep you young.
They sure do. They do.
They would make me old.
Yes.
We cannot wait to learn from you. But before we dig into today's topic, it's our tradition to talk about what we're reading. So I won't start with you. I'll give you some time. Martin, how about you? What are you reading?
Okay.
You forgot to think about it.
You know what the show does? It's like you feel obliged to read a book a week because you don't want to talk about the same book that you read.
I just say the same book over and over and over.
Well, I did start Wolf Hall.
Do you like it?
Well, I just started it.
Okay.
But I did not know it was a historical novel.
Yeah.
And
it's so good.
Well, and when you start reading it, it's one of those books that, because I think a lot of historical fiction suffers from reading all of our modern inclinations into this character that did not live in your time and did not think like you do and all that stuff. And so I immediately recognized the authenticity in this book because it does not do that. I don't think people realize, unless you really do read, old literature, that people don't think the way we do. It's very different. The attitudes about things are completely different. There's the things that are acceptable, the things that are unacceptable are not the same things. And so I started reading this book, and there's what's going on, which we would find horrifying in the way certain people treat each other and all that stuff. But that was common. The way women are treated and the whole deal. So I immediately, because I wasn't going to read it. And I thought, well, I need to try. And I started and I realized this book is authentic in the way that it portrays people.
It's so good. I'm almost finished with it. And and it's the second time I've read it. But this time, every time I say that, I'm rereading something, and I always like it better, unless it's The Great Gatsby.
And one of the things I noticed particularly, and somebody said when the movie was it Something in Generals, the Civil War movie, Gods and Generals, came out, and there's a discussion between a husband and a wife, and it's very formal. And some young person was there, I can't remember who I was with, and they said, that seems so fake. I said, no, go read letters between husbands and wives from that era. Go read, that people were more formal in the way they talked. So much the movie, although it is in the movie, but the book True Grit is written in this very formal style. But the author was really imitating the way people actually talk to each other in those times. So I don't think we realize how informal we are about everything now. And that's one of the same thing goes for Wolf Hall. It's a little more formal in the way even though you have like lower class situations, it's still more formal even there.
Is that MP's book this month?
Is
that why you're both reading it?
It is, yes. Okay. It's our MP book group book. But I'm going to go ahead and read the other two. I am. I've got about 100 pages left in Wolf Hall, and I'm ready just to move on. You know what's going to ultimately happen because it is history. Mm-hmm. So all, but just the way she talks about the characters and she's just really an amazing author. I have a really good appreciation.
And who wrote it?
For her, Hilary Mantel. Okay. And she recently died. She died last year, so there won't be any more. But I think these 3 books really are her, or at least the first one. I can't say about the other 2 yet, but I think that's her masterpiece. I've read other things by her that aren't this good.
What are you reading now? That
Wolf Hall. Okay. And I'm reading one of the 6th grade American history little supplemental readers is going out of print. So I'm trying to find a replacement. And there is some really bad children's literature out there. I bought one on Abraham Lincoln thinking, well, this looks positive because it has such a nice, beautiful cover. And it's written in the first person. So you've got Abraham Lincoln as a child speaking, which is just all these made up conversations and one of them I just was flipping through. When I saw it was in the first person, I immediately was like, no. And then Tara came into my office and she goes, oh, that's a beautiful cover. I said, yes, but I started flipping through. And there was this conversation between Abe Lincoln and a friend where he was saying he didn't believe in the Bible. And I'm like, okay, hang on. Where did this come from? Who made this conversation up?
Right.
And why would we expose young children to it? There's just crazy stuff out there.
That's the big secret is I remember going to like library book sales, years ago, and they had this big children's section and there was all these books and there's so much trash put out.
There is so much.
And there's very
and now
few
people
of those
can
books.
self-publish
Right.
trash.
So people will just go buy a book for like a present for somebody and they haven't read it. And don't ever do that.
Don't do that. Don't do it. So I'm reading. I've got one now that is Alexander Hamilton and it's called The Duel.
Ooh.
Hamilton and Aaron Burr.
Aaron Burr.
And it's looking promising. I've read about a third of it. So maybe that will be the choice. Who knows?
And how about you, Tanya?
I do like history and I do like historical fiction. I like to put myself in that time. Some of the authors do a great job of putting you in thinking like, well, I thought I knew this about history, but I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
But every year I start January 1, I'm like, whether it's a church, like let's read this many chapters of the Bible a day or do this program. And I always fall off the wagon. I never succeed. I'm 30 days into the Bible recap. And I really like it.
That.
You know how it's like
it's
you
cool.
have set in chapters to read. Mm-hmm. There's a summary and there's an application. And I'm 30 and I will succeed.
That's
I know I will
awesome.
finish. So I am proud of myself for that.
So I bought one because I was going to do that because we've joined a new church and we're not really involved in a Bible study yet. And I really miss that. And so the one I bought it because I really liked the books by this commentator. And so I started it and his commentary is very good. But then there's this other person that does more than half of them. And they're not good. They're trite and just trivial and pithy. And I just am not getting anything out of them. And so I dropped it. So now maybe I'll try yours.
It is really good.
Yeah.
It is.
I do the Catholic Church daily reading every day and translate it from the Latin.
You're translating it from the Latin? How much is it?
The gospel reading every day, yeah.
Is it a lot?
Well, it's a paragraph or 2 or 3.
Okay, because we're having to read.
Well, this is
chapters.
3 years. The church goes on a 3-day cycle.
Oh, 3 years.
I'm sorry, 3-year cycle.
Well, I might
and so
do that.
You get it all read.
Maybe that's what we need to do, Tanya. 3 years.
I'm doing well on this one.
But the other thing is
recommending it to others.
doing, so it's my Latin practice and it's my Bible reading. So it's 2 things in one. And reading the Bible in an ancient language is such a different experience. And because you're doing it in Latin and you're paying attention to the tenses and all
Makes
that
you slow
stuff,
down.
You see things that you never would have seen. And so that is an invaluable experience, I think, for me. And I remember the readings a lot better because it's harder to do it.
That's
you got to
right.
translate it.
That's right. You really have to contemplate every single sentence.
Yeah, and I have the website for the church reading. That's the English. And then I have this program. It's called Vol Search 4. And it has the Latin and the English on both sides. And on the Latin side, you can hover the cursor over the word, and the Latin word, and it will tell you the English translation and its grammar form if you need it.
Cool.
And so
wow.
The more you do it, of course, the less you need that. You start, if you're doing it regularly, it becomes easier. But that's one of the best things I do every day.
I don't know that my Latin's good enough to do that. I think I would need to go back through the grammar first.
One thing I'll say about the Vulgate is it's easier Latin. Mm-hmm. So that's one advantage of that.
Do you need to have been through the entire Latin grammar though? Because I've only been half.
Well, okay, that's where the Vol Search help is great because you hover over it and it will tell you what the grammatical form is. So it helps even in that.
Right. So you could learn grammar really.
Yeah, you're actually. I mean, I do realize in doing it sometimes, and I need to look at that form because my grammar's rusty. And I thought, there's some declensions I need to kind of go over again, some conjugations.
That's good.
Yeah. Vocabulary refresh too?
Well, yeah, but the vocabulary isn't as much of an issue. It's really the grammatical form because, it's Latin's in a different order, the word order and everything, and you got to break it down more often than not. So.
Right.
Learn something every time we talk about the book selections that are happening at this table.
Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
Well, on to today's topic. Tanya, you've been teaching for almost 20 years, and we have received several kindergarten-related questions to our podcast at Memoria Press email. It's kind of like a mailbox where people can send questions, and we've gotten several kindergarten-related ones. So I wanted to read you two that are kind of similar and related, and then I thought we could just open it up to the group to help these people with their questions. So here's the first one from Joni. And Joni writes, within the past year or so, I've noticed several popular podcasts aimed at young moms promoting the idea that children should not receive formal academic lessons until the age of 6 or 7. The episodes in question usually include an interview with educators from the Waldorf, Charlotte Mason, or unschooling approaches. I refuse to drink that Kool-Aid, and I'm working through Memoria Press's junior kindergarten curriculum with my 4-year-old. However, it's tempting at times when she's struggling with the writing portion or staying focused to say, maybe she just isn't ready. How would you all, in the classical tradition more broadly, address the question of when to begin formal lessons? Thank you for all the wonderful conversations, Joni. And then the second question is from Mariel. She says, hi, Classical Etc. team. Would you be able to do an episode this year on the ideal age to teach your child to read? Is it worth teaching reading early in preschool, like phonics and sounds, or best to wait until kindergarten or first grade? There are many different opinions, and it would be helpful to hear the Memoria Press perspective. The common thread, I think, in both of those listener questions is really about readiness, don't you think? Mm-hmm. And it makes a lot of sense. Joni and Muriel and all of us, we want our little ones to be prepared. We want them to have what their peers have. We want them to do well, but we haven't been teaching kindergarten for 20 years. So thankfully today we get to ask you.
Well, there is nothing better than a student coming in being ready for kindergarten. I have over the years, I've had students that 100% are ready, and then others that might not have been as ready, that just need a little work. But everybody gets there, as far as, just like the walking and the talking, going to get there. What makes kids ready for kindergarten is when they can know the difference between the uppercase and lowercase letters. They can recognize the letter sounds. And they can do simple things as far as cutting. They can do, those little fine manipulative things. They know how to use scissors. Rhyming words is big. And I don't think that the parents realize how big that is.
I never realized how big that was.
Rhyming is.
Rhyming. That reading books that like Dr. Seuss or books that that have a lot of rhyme in them do help students with reading. I just thought they were fun. I didn't know they had a point.
So
Yeah,
that
I'll be
really-
teaching the S sound. And so it's like, we'll be talking about, or word families. The word will be Sam and we'll ham, so we'll build words. And then it's like, we'll go around the room, Sam, ham, jam. And then somebody will say sand. Oh, because they hear some of the same sounds, but they don't understand what is rhyming, what is, and they don't understand that. So rhyming is big, but then also knowing the difference and being able to match uppercase and lowercase letters, but then also knowing in your name why you don't write uppercase, lowercase, uppercase, uppercase, lowercase, lowercase in a name. And it's little things like that. And I think a lot of preschools now only teach uppercase.
Interesting.
And because a lot of the students will come in, they'll have beautiful penmanship, but it's all uppercase. Mm-hmm. And but at least they've been exposed to it. But then years ago, a big thing was your address and know your phone number. And anymore kids aren't knowing their phone numbers.
Oh, because they don't have to.
They don't have to. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can tell you, like, my grandmother died in 1992. I can still tell you her phone number because as a child, I was constantly doing it on the rotary phone. Yeah. My best friend. I know phone numbers.
Yeah.
But now you don't, number one, they don't have the practice of the rotary. They know, do you learn mom's phone cell number? Do you learn dad's cell phone number? There's so many numbers and it's really hard for the kids to understand that. And then mom's cell phone that might be 270 and then 6, like a whole, different area codes from mom and dad. It's a lot. And the kids aren't having that practice. So, but I feel like knowing something like your phone number, your address, it's good because it teaches kind of those memorization skills and things that you need, being able to answer questions. So that's like interesting. And then also a lot of parents don't understand that a child needs to come to school knowing 3-step directions. Like they will say, okay, go get your coat. Well, in kindergarten, we're like, get out your dry erase board, your marker, your eraser, or get your pencil, get your phonics book, and some of this are very like, whoa. And so 3-step directions are really beneficial to that promote, kindergarten readiness.
You learn all those things when you're a child, and then you get to 65 and you start forgetting them again.
3-step directions.
Don't give Martin don't give Martin 3-step directions. That's right. That is funny that you regress.
Dear, where have you been? I forgot where we were.
Well, that's really helpful, Tanya. And it sounds like a lot of those things, whether it's like using scissors or rhyming, that can take place in really informal ways.
Sure, and working puzzles.
Yeah.
And
Legos,
there's lots of Legos.
Sand, Play-Doh.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All of those things. And we do have a kindergarten readiness exam on or assessment on our website somewhere, probably I don't know where it is, honestly.
We can make sure we link
that. But it's on there.
Okay, great.
That helps people. And I think there's something on there too about if you need help with fine motor skills, because one thing that Joni said was that, the writing portion, her daughter's struggling with, and that is totally developmental. I mean, that is those little muscles in the hands. Now, it could be, I hate to write because it hurts my hand because I have a terrible pencil grip and I have a terrible penmanship, and it truly hurts me to write.
It hurts to read sometimes.
I know. It's really bad, and I can't seem to fix it. Well, why did they let me out of first grade?
It's a good
They should
question.
never have let me out.
Should still be
unable to write. And I'm still struggling from, I guess, a bad first grade teacher.
The other aspect of this too is the sort of multi-sensory aspect of a lot of this stuff, because I think I have no studies to support this, but just working with kids and our grandkids and all that over the years, it's like reading to them helps. Just seeing the words a bunch of times, even though you got to do the phonics and all that,
and
it's
even
something
though
familiar to them.
When you say reading the same words over and over, that children love to be read the exact same book over and over and over.
And when you're doing phonics, you're matching the written thing with the audible thing.
That's right.
And so it helps to know both those really well. I mean, so hearing the actual writing, seeing the letters, in the books that they're read all the time. I just think we don't, and I don't know if there's even a way to study that, but I bet it seems to me like a child who is read to is going to more easily learn how to decode words and to write them down. And I don't know what the exact scientific connection is, but somehow that seems to be the case.
Are there?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
I agree. I really did think that with my first child that it was that he went into kindergarten reading because I was such a good mother and read to him all the time. But then my second son, when he got ready to go to kindergarten, he wasn't reading, and he was getting the same amount of reading that I had done with my first son. I hadn't changed anything. And so I thought, maybe it's not me.
Well, how do you know when a child is ready to read?
I mean, that's a big question here, is when do you know that a child is ready to read? And I do want to caution that what our junior K program is doing is hopefully getting them ready to read, but we're not expecting kids to come out of junior K reading. Mm-hmm. And so I do think, or even writing, it's really an introduction to letters. Hopefully junior K gets them to the point where all of that list that Tanya gave of things they need to be able to do to be reading ready. Hopefully that's what our junior K program is taking care of.
Well, the other thing too is I think one of the things you don't hear much about in terms of phonics instruction, getting those decoding skills down, is a great equalizer, because there are some kids that they figure things out on their own. They're very naturally gifted in some way, and somebody uses the look-say method with them or something, and they can do it, but a lot of kids can. And so I think one of the problems we have with the variability in reading skills is because, and by we I just mean our school systems, is that they haven't, at least up until recently, been focusing on phonics. And if all the children are taught phonics, they will all learn to read, and the differences between the kids who don't and can read are going to be much smaller. Because I look at our kids, and they have very different ability levels. But
when they all do learn to read, it's an even playing field.
It's an even playing field.
After that, it's the same thing. Like, when did your child start walking? It's so important before your child walks. But then once they've been walking a couple of years, nobody's thinking about when did you learn how to walk, or you quit asking when did you learn how to read. Mm-hmm. But it's a huge thing. You can't go any further in education until you can read. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think kindergarten teachers are so amazing, because they teach this skill that they teach, this skill that these homeschool parents are trying to teach. That's it. There's nothing else more important throughout your entire education. Yes,
and it has to be done by a certain time. Gene Shaw, the Harvard Reading Laboratory, used to talk about this. In fact, I think they call it the Shaw curve, where if you're not reading by about third grade, you are probably going to be hampered by that for the rest of your life. So it's really important. And, there are variabilities there, and some kids are going to learn earlier and some kids are going to learn later, but they really need to be reading well.
You need to be working toward that.
Yeah. And Tanya, is that the main goal in your kindergarten classroom? Like, they will come out reading?
Oh, definitely, yes.
But they don't have to come into kindergarten reading?
No.
But they will leave the end of the year reading?
Oh, they're reading good sentences by week 4.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. I didn't know that.
That's because we don't ask them to read anything that we haven't already taught the sound of and the letter of. So our sentences are silly. Mm-hmm. But we do have them reading. I mean, they're reading I Am Sam in week 1, aren't they?
Yes.
So they technically think they're reading, but they're just reading the few letters that we've taught.
I see.
A few years ago, I had a student, and she came in and she was very proud that she could read. and nobody else in the class could read. Well, we start automatically doing these sounds, and week 1 we're at the letter S, week 2 we're at A, or we start with M and then A and then S. And so we're building Sam right away, and then we build ran, Sam ran. And so we were a couple of weeks in, and so we were reading these sentences. And this little girl, she looked around and she was like, when did they learn to do that? And she knew, she came in and she was like, well, I was the reader. And then that's how quickly everybody else can catch up. Mm-hmm. So sometimes we don't
being the only one who could read.
But it is good if you do have a student that is very close to reading or reading, because it kind of it almost challenges the students. Okay, they're reading that. But then also on, the first couple of weeks of school, we went to get to know our students. We have them do this All About Me box. And so, this year, a little girl, she sat down and she said, now I can already read. And I knew she couldn't. But, she pulls out this book that she had been read to over and over.
She had it memorized.
And she had it memorized. But to her, that was reading. And she was so proud, and that she wanted to go on with that. And that's one of the big things in reading is the motivation to want to read. And so I'm like, oh, yes, you can read. Yes.
Which is another argument for reading to them.
Oh, 100%.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
I also wanted to point out when we are talking about students that come in already reading, it seems easy, right? So then just move them on. But my son that went in reading, I was concerned about that. I said, well, he's already reading. Mm-hmm. So he was reading I Can Read books when he went into kindergarten. And so I didn't really understand, he was having to do all of that phonics work, even because nobody else was reading. And so the teacher would send him a book home to read, and he had extra homework. So he continued to read. She was a very good teacher and really knew how to do this. But he needed, even though he was reading, he needed all that phonics work that was preparing other students to read. Mm-hmm. Because then he became a very good speller.
That's what I was going to say. Is that spelling matters too.
Phonics is important, and you can't just skip over it because your child is reading, even though it feels like you should be able to. But phonics has more than one. The end goal is, of course, that they can read and that their reading fluency continues. But if you don't set a good foundation for that, then they're not going then to be able to read more difficult things because they won't have the phonetic skills to decode words or to figure out how to pronounce hard words.
Right. And one of the things behind that is that, because what you're having to do in the first couple of years is the child has a certain understanding level, right? And it's higher than their ability to read. And it's going to be higher than their ability to read till at some point, hopefully 3rd grade, 4th grade, their reading ability and their ability to understand are all but the same. And what happens in a lot of our schools is that they're so impatient about getting them to their understanding level, they just throw that text at them without the phonics instruction. And I think that's kind of behind a lot of the whole word type of strategies to read, is that they're trying to get them too fast to that where their understanding is. And you just have to be patient and wait until their phonics skills come up with that.
We see that a lot in the schools that we visit when we're helping them transition to classical and they want to transition primary, and their kindergarten students aren't reading or they don't go into 1st grade with the same skills that we have taught. And so they're not as far along. So we always have to modify 1st grade and take them back to part of our phonics program in K based on where they are. But after a year, when they've had that kindergarten phonics using our curriculum and our pace, then they easily the very next year move straight into 1st grade and do our 1st grade curriculum. But it does, you can't just throw something they're not ready for at them. And I think that's the big thing about, especially for Joni, is maybe her 4-year-old isn't really ready. Now the writing, Cheryl always said, even for first start reading, that the writing is not necessary, that you can teach reading without, if they can only do a few M's, and not the half a page of M's, that's okay. You can still move forward with the phonics program and just keep trying to build those fine motor skills and get their writing so that it is on pace with their reading. But obviously in a classroom, we can't do that. But at home, you've got all the freedom in the world to modify it. And then the other thing I would like to say to these women in particular is that it's, they're not, because you're homeschooling, you've got total flexibility to just wait until your child is ready without ignoring the fact that it does need to get done. And I am not a fan of unschooling. And honestly, when people call us and tell us that their third grader's not reading, and we immediately jump to have you talk to a doctor, or are there signs of other like learning issues or something, and they just say no, we just haven't gotten around to it because they weren't interested. That really just kind of gives me hives. It worries me for those children, because I think children want to learn to read. And they're missing out so much, because if you think about, if your child by, let's say, third grade is reading fluently, think what they can do.
Right.
But if not, if you're teaching them to read in third grade, and you're going to have to use a phonics program, you have to start at the beginning. You can move faster, but you've got to set that foundation. Then you're going to miss a lot of other things that they could be doing.
And particularly in a homeschool situation where you have more flexibility in how you do things, you're not having to think about a whole class. You can think about one child. I think that even, because my oldest son, I started teaching him how to read when he was 4. And you start with the short A, and that may take a week or two. But there is a sequence that you go through to do this, and you may have to take it slower with some children. But I think just about any, really even 4-year-old can learn how to read in that kind of situation where you can take your time.
Right.
But once they learn that, I remember when he was 4, and I think he was still 4 when, probably told this story before, when we're on our way to Grandma's house in Kansas, which we did every year, and he asked for a copy of Little House on the Prairie. And this was after me working with him for about 8 months. And he's quiet back there for about 2 hours. And then he says, okay, done. And I said, you read that whole book? And he said, yeah. And he did. Right. It's amazing what they can do. And when you start out first and it's really slow, keep at it, because they will eventually start picking it up faster, and finally they're free,
Yes,
and
that's the thing. It does free them.
Yeah. And I didn't know at that time, homeschooling with my first child, that I really needed to be paying attention to the spelling at that point and the penmanship. His penmanship today is horrible. But because he didn't have, this was when we were still developing Memoria Press.
Of course. Well, and it's just harder to pay good attention to at home. It really is. But my youngest son, who did not read easily and who really needed that kindergarten everyday reinforcement and learning, one time I was driving along, just when you we're telling that story, I thought, all of a sudden he said, "What's a buffet?" I said, what? I don't know what a buffet is. What do you mean? And he said, right there, all day buffet. I thought, well, he knows his phonics.
Yeah, blame the French, I think.
So is phonics work generally where you start in preparation for kindergarten and reading? Would it be phonics and reading to them? Are we leaving anything out? Is it as simple as...
I believe the first thing that you really have to look at is they have to have that letter recognition. They have to know that B makes the B sound, and that they have to know the letters and the sounds that they make. Mm-hmm. And then after that comes, then if that letter makes that sound, well, then I hear that at the beginning, what I hear at the middle, what I hear at the end, it all goes together. But that letter knowledge and the recognition of the sounds, that's top of the list, yes. And then, learning to put the sounds together, but then that goes back to those rhyming words. And then, they love to be read, children love to be read to. And in being, in reading to them, it also is growing their comprehension. Like you was talking about earlier, that, you can't just throw them all this stuff, and then it's so hard that they're not grasping what they're being read to. And then they have to want to learn to read, and a 4-year-old might not be ready. And then the 5-year-old, it might take, some confidence building. And then also, there's that print awareness after they have seen that word. And like the word stop is a great example, because they can sound that out, and that word stop is everywhere. And, you're driving down the road, and they are going to recognize that word stop. They're going to understand that, they're going to know what that word, and then be able to use it in a sentence. And then when they see it, it puts it all together.
You mentioned this a little bit. I know we've kind of touched on this. What do you do with a child who is just kind of resistant or uninterested, a little lazy with reading? What do you do with that?
Yeah, because you've got to.
I try to be. Sometimes for me, I feel like the laziness isn't necessarily laziness; it's of lack of confidence.
Okay.
And so I'm a little ooey gooey, and I try to really build that confidence. And I feel like that, that lazy with love and like you can do it, it breaks them out of that lazy shell. Because, even if they're not liking, a little story that we're reading in class, it might not, like today we read this cute little story, and this little girl, she was like, did that really happen? and so eventually there's going to be a story that piques their interest. So even though they might not want to do this, there's interest. There are so many books out there that eventually that they're going to be like, okay, that's where I'm going. They really need to, that motivation.
That's mother's advice.
Yes,
the father,
that's right. Yes.
on the other hand, because the mother's trying to be nice and luring the child into doing that. And the father's saying, you better get it done or else.
Well, I guess you need both.
Yes, you do need both.
Well, and some children just really don't like school.
Yeah.
And so they're not always going to want to do the work. So, but they have to do it. So there's character building right there. I mean, they have to do it. You can't just say, okay, you don't want to read, so we're just going to wait until you do. It may never, I don't know that my oldest son ever, if he hadn't just read, he might not be reading today.
It's been done. And in
because
fact,
he wasn't motivated to do anything.
Yeah, there was a book that came out 3 or 4 years ago, Educated by Tara Westover.
Oh, yes.
Did you
I
hear about
haven't
that?
read that.
You
It's
want,
on my
okay, you want to
list.
see what happens with homeschool, with unschooling.
Yes.
This is your example case.
Well, the
I'm
name of the
surprised
book
you
is
haven't heard of that. The
Educated.
Oxford
I've heard
She's
of
in
it,
Oxford.
but I haven't read it.
Well, it was not just skills that were never taught. She ended up learning those somehow, but just the stuff she didn't know. And there's this passage in there, and it's just frightening. And she said when I got out, because she ran away finally when she was older, and ended up going to school. And she said she would be reading something, and there would be a word in there she didn't know. And she would say, my lack of knowledge of that one word sucked the meaning out of that whole paragraph. And that's what happens, you just because, and it was something pretty obvious to all of her friends. She had to ask about it, but she didn't know it because she was isolated in a very isolated community also.
Yes.
And she just didn't know things, and that lack of knowledge of one thing and what that will do. So part of that is not really just the skill stuff, but just the importance of content knowledge, and the knowledge of what words mean.
I'd also like to hear Tanya's opinion about Joni's daughter and her inability to stay focused. How long should a kindergarten this is JK? This is a
4-year-old?
4-year-old, yes. How long can you expect them to stay focused? I'm thinking not long.
I don't think long. And she's just 4.
Right.
I mean, I think just encourage her, and here's what we should be doing. But I wouldn't force a 4-year-old.
Right.
Is not long like 10 minutes, or is that?
I think probably.
Short.
Because you move very quickly.
We move.
You do. Okay.
Yeah. I haven't paid a lot of attention to the JK material, so I'm not for sure what they're supposed to be doing.
They're literally just learning the letters, letter by letter, and doing some work with circle the words that begin with B, or the B sound.
And that shouldn't take 10 minutes.
Right. No, it shouldn't take it doesn't take very long, but but I do see that I do think focus is
it's a skill.
It is.
And you have to learn it like everything else. And like most other things, you have to start small and then expand out. So if they have problems with focus, then do something short, maybe break the same lesson up into different short things, and then go a little bit longer every day. And ultimately, like any other skill, they'll learn how to do it.
Well, and your phonics lesson you're not just teaching phonics for 90 minutes. You're doing a million different things. Right. You're doing flashcards and...
But as far as this child's focus, I mean, is the radio on, the TV on, is baby brother crying?
Yes.
Is, what I would kind of look at all the things that might go into
the environment.
Yeah. Because, with our math, we do we have a morning the math challenge, and most of the students we're doing, now we're at 30 problems. And we will do it in under 2 minutes. And so sometimes the kids will come home and they do it on the weekend and it's 9 minutes and 42 seconds. And it's and so, I reach out to them. I'm like, now in class, he does it 1 minute and 12. And she said, well, I spilled the coffee. I did and she knew everything. And I'm like, then maybe don't put or maybe just stop and say, okay, we need to start over a little bit. Right. So as far as focus goes, I would look at what else is going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem.
That's right. But if there's 4 pictures and it's just a matter of circling
pages. It is a couple of pages of work. And it does include writing. And that's just the alphabet book. But then there's the numbers book. There's all kinds of other things going on in this program. But there's nothing wrong either if I think that was a good point Martin made, that if you can do 10 minutes and that's all you get done, and you get maybe a couple of rows of something done, then just come back the next day and do the rest. Sure. And if you just do a little bit at a time, how did I read Wolf Hall? 20 minutes every morning for the past 6 weeks. And I'm very far. You can get so much done in small increments of time. It's really amazing. But the key is the consistency. The having this is the school time. It may just be 20 minutes today. Yeah. It may be 25 minutes next week. It may be 30 minutes the next. And you're building, because that is part of kindergarten, is learning to be a student, learning to sit at a desk. There's a lot. Michelle used to always say 50% of it was teaching the parents how to be parents of students.
That's true.
That's good. That's good. Tanya, can you explain to us what Memoria Press offers in the kindergarten package? What would a kindergartner be doing for reading, for phonics? It's all included.
It is all included except for the read aloud books.
Got it.
So it's literally exactly what Tanya's doing in her classroom.
Yeah.
It came out of our classrooms. And so it is a heavy focus on phonics and reading. And there are a lot of little readers that go with it, and the phonics program and classical phonics, and just a lot of components. But those components make it possible to do a lot of different things with your phonics lesson, and which is quite long because it is the core. And then it comes with Rod and Staff Math Part 1. They don't have a kindergarten.
Right.
So we use the first half of their first grade math, and then a copybook to teach writing. And at First Start Reading also teaches writing. So we're doing a lot of manuscript writing. And then the rest of the program is really the enrichment, which is the read aloud book each week that ties to their history and science and art card, music, piece of classical music, and a poem. So that's the fun part. That's the part Tanya's missing right now in order to be down here with us. is the fun part. She's taught all the hard phonics. She's taught the math. She's taught the manuscript. And now she's missing the fun part.
It's okay. I'm happy to be here.
And that's similar, Tanya, to what you do in the classroom.
Yes.
And we would suggest that you save that enrichment for last, that it is supplemental and you don't always get it done. And that's okay. Our goal is that we read the read aloud book each day they're in class. But other than that, if we don't get science or history done, that's fine as long as we get phonics and reading, math and writing done. Those are the three things you have to really concentrate on because you can't move forward. If you haven't had a science lesson on spiders, nobody's ever going to notice it's not going to prevent you from going into first grade. But if you don't know how to read, you are not going to be able to read Little Bear in the first grade.
That's right. The cumulative.
Yes.
We always talk about that. It's funny because the meat and potatoes, everybody's like, oh, you've got to get the meat and potatoes. And our M&P is math and phonics. We've got to get that in. That, you get all that stuff in the morning. And then the afternoon is the
relax and have a little bit of fun.
Yeah.
Get to relax.
After you've worked them really hard.
That's right. And I love that memory device, the meat and potatoes is math and phonics.
Yeah.
I will not forget that.
Our M&P. I have math and phonics.
Math and phonics.
And I will say that, and I guess I can say this, that my daughter, she graduated from HLS then in 2021.
Okay.
And we did not come to kindergarten here. And but I've realized very early what she was missing. So she went to school by day, and by night, I did the Memoria Press kindergarten curriculum with her.
Oh, wow.
And, you didn't know that?
No, poor Aubrey.
But look at her now,
That's right.
Now, well, I mean, it was. She had several friends here, and I was hearing all that they were doing, and I'm like,
why isn't my child doing that?
This is September. They're doing this. According to her teacher calendar, they're going to do this in February.
No.
Something's missing. And so then, and I didn't tell her why we were doing it. She didn't know. She just thought it was homework.
Little.
And so then one time she was talking to one of her friends that she was in school with, and she said, she was like, she didn't do that work. I do at night.
She found you out.
She found me out. She did. But anyway, she was ready for first grade, and it was like she was here. Yeah.
Done amazing.
And that's an encouraging note to end on too, that these skills are definitely learnable. You can work them in, even if they're, it's
but
doable.
it doesn't, but there isn't an exact time that it has to happen. I think, I think homeschoolers especially feel the burden of being responsible for their child's education. Tanya's class, those parents are making Tanya responsible for whether their child learns to read or not. When you're at home, it's all on you. It was Joyce's responsibility because Martin was doing nothing. And so it was when Martin came home, if his children couldn't read, who was he going to blame? His wife. Martin.
I didn't prepare a defense for this.
It's a bigger burden. It's a huge burden to think I'm responsible. What if my child isn't reading? So am I failing? Rather than being able just to relax. I would have been so much more relaxed if I could do this again. If I could go back and do it again, I wouldn't worry near as much as I worried. But everything, and you listen to other people and they're telling you what their child's doing, and you're like, we're not doing that. We're not doing those things. And we had to, I really had to, I had Cheryl Lowe mentoring me and just poo-pooing everything that other people were doing that she felt was a waste of time. And so that helped me to know that when people looked at me like I had three heads because my fifth grader wasn't doing pre-algebra yet. So, I had bought into Cheryl's philosophy, which was a big help. You really do need support. You need a support system. And I hope that we provide some of that for people. But I'm telling you, I would be such a relaxed homeschooler now that my kids would not even recognize me because I was the box checker, that we've got to get it done. What if we get behind?
Well, and it's amazing
Plenty of time.
how you forgot. Like, I had a very good education. I went to Missouri Synod Lutheran schools, and they taught phonics, and everything was very traditional in the skills area. They read to us. We read things in class. It was a very good education. But then you have your own kids, and you forget all that. You forget what you did.
Well, that's true.
And I think that's the case with a lot of people. Is then they'll go, well, what do I teach to read? And you just grab something, and it turns out to be not really something that's not like our programs that, are very strictly
like a phonics
program.
Right.
And it's like you didn't notice that you're not doing it the way that you learned.
And you're not going to, because once you learn to read,
right,
all that
that's right. You
goes
forget
by the
about how you
wayside,
did it.
right?
Yeah.
Good. Covered a lot of ground, I think. Thank you, Tanya, for joining us. We will let you get back to your classroom.
Invite me again. This was fun.
We would love to have you back. I'm sure we'll get more questions. We always do. So that would be wonderful. Thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
And Martin and Tanya, your expert advice and your experience. I always learn from your stories. And thank you for joining us too. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.